Welcome back. Question 2 of the first set of 5 difficult GCSE questions. This one, as you can see, is obviously a 3D trigonometry and or a 3D Pythagoras question. I won't say much else. Clearly there's a lot of words here, so write it down carefully or take a picture or write on it or whatever works best for you. Give it a go. Should take you about 4 or 5 minutes. Come back, see my solution, and let's see how we've done. Talk soon. Okay, so how did you do? This question, as I said before, is a 3D trigonometry question. What makes this difficult is a couple of things. So firstly is the angle I'm looking for is a fairly strange angle. So reading through all the text on the question. So ABCD is a cross section of a prism where ABDE is a square. So in other words, this face here is going to be a square, and that's obviously relevant because that allows me to work out some sides once I know one side. And then BCDE is an equilateral triangle, so I know that's equilateral. So in other words, it must be the case that all these sides here are exactly the same length. All right, so far. Then it tells me that EF is 2 times AE, and so I can see EF is this length down here, and I know that's twice the side of the square. And then it says M is the midpoint of GF, so in other words, M is this point here, which is the midpoint. Now, there are a couple of ways of solving this. I mean, there's many ways of solving this. So way 1 is just introduce a variable, such as X, and way 2 is just use some numbers, just scale some numbers. I'm a maths teacher, so I like using X's. So I'm going to say that this length, the length of the square, is 2x. And the reason I'm doing that is because then I can say that G to M and M to F are both x each. I don't need to deal with half x's and taking halves of other things. So it means this total length here is going to be 2x, and it means this length here is going to be 4x. So I've then got some values. Then what do I need to do? So M is the midpoint of GF, so that GM is vertical. So in other words, it's just saying that this is directly above this point here, which it must be if it's an equilateral triangle. Angle MAJ. Now this is where the question suddenly becomes slightly harder, because A is in the corner over here, M is on the opposite side in the middle, and then J is all the way up here. So I've got a really difficult triangle that I need to work out, and I need to work out what this angle here is. And then it says, for no obvious reason, tan y equals t, find the value of t, and then present it as a third. Okay, let's come back to that bit later. What it really wants me to do is it wants me to try and work out what this angle is. So how am I going to try and approach that? Well, as ever with these questions, it's just a case of working out what I would like to get to, and then think about the steps to get there. So if I draw the triangle here, so if I redraw the triangle AJM, so there's my A, there's my J, and there's my M. I don't know what A to M is, I don't know what M to J is, and I don't know what A to J is. So it's going to be pretty hard for me to find out this angle here, which is the angle that I'm looking for. And actually the question says it's Y, so let's change that to a Y. So I'm going to need to do some more triangles in 2D in order to work out what this is. Now, this is where these diagrams get very messy, and it's quite hard to do this without drawing over lots of things and making it near unreadable. So I'm going to do my best down below. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to start by looking at the triangle on the floor, which is this triangle here. So it's this triangle A to M to G. And for the sake of neatness, I'm going to redraw it down here. So I've got the triangle G up here, there's my A, and there's my M. Now from above, I know that length is X. I know this is 4X because it told me in the question what these values are. And I also know this is a right angle triangle because it's on the floor. This here must be a right angle. Now, whenever you've got a question in GCSE, it gets a bit harder for A level, but for GCSE, if you have a triangle, it's either going to be right angled, in which case it's probably Pythagoras and trigonometry, or it's going to be not right angled, in which case you're going to need to use the sine rule and the cosine rule. Here I have a right angle triangle, and I want to work out A to M, which is then going to give me this side up here. So I can use Pythagoras. Pythagoras tells me that x squared plus 4x all squared, which is equal to x squared plus 16x squared. Well, let's write that out so we have the whole solution, which is equal to 17x squared. Now, be careful again. The square root of 17 is the square root of 17. The square root of x squared is x squared square rooted, which is just x. And that gives me the length, the square root of 17. Now, Whenever you're doing one of these questions, always look where you're trying to get to. I'm trying to get to this value here, and that's got a 17 in it, and I found a 17. I'm feeling a little bit better that I'm probably doing something that's not incorrect. The next step, so I've now found out what a to m is. So I can say a to m is root 17. Let's write this neat so you can actually read it. I can see a to m is root 17 times x. Okay. The next step is I need to work out what the height from m to j is. So in other words, I need to work out this length down here. Well, I know this part of the length is 2x, because this is a square, and I know the side length of the square is 2x. And this is the height of this equilateral triangle up here. So if I redraw this again down here so it's slightly neater, I have worked out, or I need to work out, this length from here to here. So there's my m, and there's my j at the top. I know this is x, I know this is x, I know that's 2x, and more notably, I know this equilateral triangle here, which is what I'm going to concentrate on, has a side length of 2x. Now, if you haven't done this already, the way to work out the height of an equilateral triangle is to divide it into 2. So I'm going to look at just this part of the triangle here, where I can break it out. Remember, I want the height. The height is what I'm looking for. So I know the side length of the triangle is x, 2x. I know the bottom length is x because I've halved it, and the height is what I want. And again, right angle triangle is not trigonometry, so therefore it must be Pythagoras. So therefore I can say that h squared plus x squared is going to be 2x all squared. H squared plus x squared equals 4x squared, which means that h squared is the square root of 3x squared, which is the square root of 3 times x. Again, very similar to what I did with the 17 above. Now, importantly, I've worked out what m to j is, because m to j is going to be the 2x from the square plus the root 3x, which I can write as 2 plus root 3 times x. And that's given me the height. And crucially, if I go all the way back to where I was above, I now know that this is 2 plus root 3 times x. And if I've got two sides, I can then work out a length. Now, this is where the question sort of gave you that weird formatting. It's told you that tan t or tan y is t. I also know that tan y is opposite over adjacent, which is 2 plus root 3 over root 17x, with the x on the top as well. I can cancel my x's out, which is going to give me 2 plus root 3 over root 17. So really I've done the question, haven't I? Because I've worked out what tan t is, I just now need to put it in this format. So part one of the question was basically working out what the angle was. Part two is really just a surd conversion, is I need to make 2 plus root 3 look like the thing down the bottom which the answer wants. So let's write this down here. So I've got 2 plus the square root of 3, and that's all divided by root 17. Now, from my surd maths, I know the way to get rid of surds on the bottom, the way to rationalise, is to multiply top and bottom by whatever the surd is, which in this case is root 17. And if I expand the brackets at the top, I get 2 root 17 plus 3 times 17 is 51. And so that's the square root of 51 divided by root 17 times root 17 is just 17. This is looking a lot more like the answer. The problem is the answer has numbers inside and no numbers outside the surd. So I need to put this 2 inside. Well, if you think about it, 2 is the same as the square root of 4. So if I want to put this inside, that's going to be the same as 4 times 17 square rooted plus 51, or the square root of 51, divided by 17. And 4 times 17 is going to be 68. And so it's going to be the square root of 68 plus the square root of 51, all divided by 17. And that is indeed the correct answer. If you got that, well done. Difficult question. So a few bits to that question. Lots of people dislike 3D trigonometry, and totally understandably. It's quite hard to see. It's really hard to draw, quite hard to explain. It's quite hard to teach, actually, as well. But if you got to that answer, well done. Check out the channel. There is 5 questions in this first series, and then there'll be another series of 5 questions coming up. If you have any questions you find or anything you're not sure about, leave it in the comments. I will come back to you. I will answer you directly. Do like and subscribe. It really does help that algorithm, which I know we hear about all the time, but genuinely does help. And I will see you on the next question.